Doesn't that just reek of laziness? If that filled you with dread instead of fear, then this movie is certainly going to do the same for you. The Unholy. Originally seeing that the one and only Sam Raimi was a producer for this film, certainly had maybe not the highest of expectations considering he wasn't the one in terms of directing it or writing it for that matter. Well, when it comes to a renowned name that comes to just producer, especially this previous year, I've certainly learned that that doesn't guarantee a piece that is up to par with that person's previous work if you have other people at the helm of camera and writing, of course. Not to disrespect or discredit the filmmakers that worked on this particularly, but it certainly pales in comparison to what Sam Raimi has put out in the past. Having expectations that this would be similar to Sam Raimi's movies was certainly a misfire for me, as I'm sure it was for many other people. This movie was directed by Evan
Spiliotopoulos.
I'm not even going to try to pronounce that last name. This is his first directorial debut. He has a track of being the screenplay writer for so many movies. It is absolutely mind-boggling. It's so mind-boggling because someone with so much experience, it certainly is bizarre. To go from so much experience to then write this, it certainly feels like it's in the wrong order. With that, I mean that it just seems like this is something that a dedicated screenplay writer, it feels like this would be like the very first thing they would write and then would improve upon it, but it certainly didn't feel that way here. The movie stars Jeffrey Dean Morgan, an investigator who goes around the countrysides, sort of the rural areas of Massachusetts, sort of like an independent news chaser, sort of like Jake Gyllenhaal's character from Nightcrawler in a way, where he's out there to investigate criminal activities as well as anything supernatural, of course. But of course, he wasn't expecting to get tangled in this particular supernatural tale. Upon investigating this religious town, he discovers that Cricket Brown's character, a deaf and mute girl. I actually don't remember if she was deaf or mute. She might have just been one or the other, but either way, she couldn't speak. That's mute. I don't recall if she was deaf or not. Even after multiple rewatches, I can remember a lot of things about this movie. Whatever. Cricket Brown, who suddenly gains the ability to speak and talk when Jeffrey Dean Morgan discovers a creepy-ass little doll that was used just in rituals back in the olden days of that little town. So of course, upon this cute little doll, obviously it's going to arise a curse and something evil within this little town that has been hidden for centuries. Ooh, so spooky. On paper, like, this movie actually starts off fairly strong in terms of its execution. Its cinematography work is absolutely gorgeous. It's an absolutely gorgeous looking movie. It looks sharp, it looks clean, so much clarity in the shots, a lot of creative composition, certainly. It really is, surprise, surprise, it all comes down to how the writing is executed, especially by the third act. The movie does start off in a good mystery, basically until we find out for sure what this evil entity is. That shrouded mystery is effective. It's fairly effective, I would say, and I was somewhat engaged in the idea of having just this regular guy be the one to slowly discover just what it is exactly that's attaching to this innocent deaf girl, what it is that is making her to speak and making her behave in super strange ways that nobody in this town has ever seen. In a way, it's a pretty common thing for demonic entities to, I guess in movies, they go, step by step, a little tier system where they slowly up the ante with every scene, slowly getting to more a dramatic showmanship of their abilities. But in the case here, what was cool is that the demonic entity actually tricks the townspeople into thinking that it is actually that of a holy angelic being, not one that is of a a maleficent being that is disguising itself as a good Holy Spirit, when it's clear by the end that it was its intention to trick and destroy those that are very religious in this town, essentially. Now, the motivation for this entity's actions, surprise, surprise, not very clear. All we get is a first-person perspective of this witch being hung from a tree. All we need to know is that this witch was a satanic worshiper who just wants to spread chaos and misery across those who choose to worship the false god according to her. So, yay, something completely original that we have never seen in any horror movie before. If you are a fan of horror, you have seen this movie before. If you are a fan especially of demon horror, ghost horror, entity horror that comes to attack and possess horror, that sort of genre, you have seen this movie countless times. Certainly done better. Certainly with less cheap attempt at jump scares, ones with less jump scares entirely. But I understand every once in a while when a filmmaker wants to establish a jump scare, and there certainly have been examples of really good jump scares. Examples such as the James Wan movies. What makes a jump scare cheap? A cheap cheap jump scare is one where a loud stinging noise is going to be accompanying for all jump scares, of course. But what makes a jump scare cheap, if it's a false scare, if we are following the protagonist or one of the main characters and they stumble across something that isn't an actual threat to them, and it's just sort of played just to fake out the audience and to just have something to just wake us up while we're falling asleep. Jump scares that can be effective are ones where it makes sense in the context of the story, where our character or the character we are following should be afraid of what it is that is jump scaring them, essentially. One that is of a malicious entity, not one that is just, oh, it's your friend, oh, it was something you shouldn't be afraid of. It's so overdone. Can we please stop doing that, please? I think the talent did good for what they were given here. I really like Jeffrey Dean Morgan. I don't think I've ever seen a bad performance from him. He does well with what he is given, as is the rest of the other cast members. I don't have anything against either of them. The thing I remember mostly is just dozing off in that third act, because by the end of it, it was just so predictable and there was nothing too much besides the decent cinematography. There was nothing exactly that had style, flair to it, original imagery, or moments that stick in your mind because you've never seen it before done in any other horror movies. You have seen so many compositions in this movie. You have seen so many moments in this movie. You have seen so many moments in this horror movie in other horror movies. The actual design of this demonic entity in the end is actually really cool. Look at this. Tell me that this doesn't look awesome, actually. The way it moves around, everything, it all looks great. But it just shows up at the very end for such a short amount of screen time that it really just feels like a cheap tactic to just sort of send the audience away with just one final big explosive finality instead of one that is actually more personal, one that can be more psychological or emotionally damaging towards these characters. But no, it just seems this awesomely designed demon is just sort of wasted, unfortunately. And again, it all comes down to the writing and execution of these characters and this entity. It's just shrouded by cheap jump scare and just predictable storytelling. But again, when it comes to horror movies, it's obviously up to preference as to what you find scary. I personally did not find this scary. I found it predictable, I found it boring, and I found it lazy. I can appreciate every once in a while big, booming, loud horror movies instead of the more mature, methodical, psychological approach to horror. I'm sure there are audience members out there that do find this scary, and that's okay. I understand. There certainly are moments that I can certainly see as creepy. So close. It's so close for me. I'm like, I can certainly see it. I can certainly see the creepy potential here. 5 out of 10. Some may find it scary. I found it to go on for a bit too long. Man, don't you just hate it when people squander their potential and just settle for cheap jump scares?